We are living in a world where colonization from the occupation of land has been transformed into the occupation of the mind. I encountered these multi-million pound humanitarian charities. And the first thing, what was shocking for me, was that the language they used is a copy-paste of the language you see in global multinational corporations.
How do I, for example, survive in neoliberalism? Bismillah wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear viewers, dear listeners, welcome to Botswana's first Muslim podcast, The Scholar and the Student. I'm your host, Mustaqim Habib Al-Maliki, aka Moss. I did say last Ramadan after the episode that we will continue after Ramadan. You may be seeing this in Ramadan 2026. That does not mean that we're a Ramadan-only podcast from now. But we thought this would be a great time to have our guest on, inshallah, as your Ramadan special and see how we can benefit from him. So today I've got my notebook and a pen. That can only mean one thing on The Scholar and the Student. That means we have a sociologist on board. So welcome for the first time to Botswana, albeit virtually. Please join me in welcoming Dr. William Barylo. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Dr. William. Comment allez-vous aujourd'hui?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. No, alhamdulillah, I'm okay. I'm good.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Great. So, mashallah, Dr. Will and I go way back, kind of. I remember our first interaction was me getting catfished, and I did not know that until he exposed himself years later. So I think sometime before the COVID pandemic, we'll get more into Dr. William's bio later on. But before that, before the pandemic in 2020, there was a page on Instagram that looked interesting to me, so I decided to follow it. And little did I know that that thing was just a bunch of phoniness and just a bunch of fakeness. So, Dr. William Barylo, in light of recent events, would you please like to explain why you catfishing 20-year-old on Instagram?
Yeah, can you just remind me what page it was?
Well, yeah, I believe it was called Irad Akbar Ali or something along that line.
Yes, so it was art project slash sociological experiment which I have created in order to prove that everything you see on Instagram can be faked. It was a mean to also reverse engineer how influencers are becoming famous and are able to secure brand deals, are able to earn money and gain followers by completely faking their engagement figures and following the right trends. So I have created this character, which is, I would say, a summary, a caricature of all these male Muslim lifestyle influencers slash get rich quick gurus who would wear designer brands, spend his holidays in Dubai, drive sports cars, and all the metrics that you see on this account have been bought. So the number of followers, number of likes, the even the customized comments where people say "Mashallah," it's all customized. It's all bought. Because you have tools to reverse to figure out, the following, if the one influencer is his following genuine or not, and they show you the curves. And if you have a spike, it means only one thing, that this person has bought followers. And this is how I understood that this whole social media thing is an illusion. So and no, the thing is, these numbers, although they are fake, brands, at least back in the days, would believe these numbers and would then secure deals with these influencers out of hot air, which means people would be getting away with like real money, real products, and real platforming for lying, basically. So I wanted to expose this, and so yeah, the experiment was successful because a lot of people then, real people, started to follow this account, whether it is small brands or minor celebrities in the UK. And this is when I realized that wow, this is just completely insane when you think about it. But this is how a lot of industries work, not only social media. We've had many scandals. If you look at the Silicon Valley, people setting up companies selling fake products or products that do not exist and securing literally billions of dollars of funding. It's just insane. It is,
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think you speak to some of the subjects we've already covered on this podcast, such as capitalism, such as neoliberalism. My last episode was with Professor Waleed Sami, and we did a full breakdown about capitalism and the Muslim approach to capitalism. And people are free to agree and disagree on that. I've also had Momo Dutal of the Malcolm Effect, and long before he was famous on the American news and all that stuff, he was on my podcast, so I take good privilege in having him on. But I think what you're touching on, Doc, is this system that we call capitalism, this system that we call neoliberalism, and you also have a book called Muslims in Neoliberal Empire. So, where was the light switch moment for you? When did you decide that you want to start studying this system called neoliberalism and the Muslim position in it? And I guess you could also talk about your journey to Islam in that sphere and perhaps your developments from group to group, if you will.
yeah. So I embraced Islam in 2008 in France, and I spent 5 years as a Muslim in France before going to the UK. And in France, what I witnessed in the community is that whether you were Sufi, Salafi, Sunni, Shia, all the Muslims were working together. And I'm talking about people of my generation, so born in the 80s and the 90s, millennials. And people had no problem with that, even working with non-Muslim and in the like small charities, not being paid, just doing this because the society needs us to do something. And for me, it was for 5 years the norm. It was the standard. And this was my understanding of Islam, that no matter what is your culture, your madhab, your ethnicity, we are here to serve humanity. Things have changed when I came to the UK and I encountered these multi-million pound humanitarian charities. And the first thing, what was shocking for me, was that the language they used is a copy paste of the language you see in global multinational corporations, whether we talk about banking, insurance, finance. Uh, it was a completely corporate language for a non-for-profit charity, which already I found intriguing. And as the years went by, I was just witnessing scandal after scandal after scandal. Charities diverting zakat for the CEO to buy a sports car. People being paid dozens of thousands of pounds for fundraising. Uh, Dozens of thousands of pounds spent on marketing, on hiring hotels like the Ritz in London for their fundraising dinner. And to me, something was not adding up. How can you say that you are humanitarian, not for profit, and have Muslim or Islamic in your name, and being all about prestige, fame, wealth, material goods? Where is your Islam gone? Where is your humanity gone? Not mentioning when people went abroad on missions, they would behave like Christian colonial missionaries from the 19th century. So you have seen maybe these pictures, they take their selfies with orphans and poor people that they don't ask permission for, they don't credit them, but they're going to take these pictures because it's for proving people that we're doing a good job. But don't you realize when they I see this picture? Don't they realize that this is the same behavior that the people who have enslaved their own ancestors, people who have colonized their own ancestral countries, were doing? And this is when I saw all these paradoxes that I decided I need to investigate what's happening there. Because my job as a sociologist, I'm like a psychologist of the society. I'm not here to say this is good or this is bad, but I am here to understand why are people behaving in this way? What in their story, in their reasoning, how do they justify these actions and this behavior? So there's a lot more anecdotes I can talk about, but I would say these were the main trigger points.
Okay, mashallah. I think that's something to chew off on. Would you say then that what influenced the Muslim community in the UK to be like that? Why were they more entrenched in, perhaps we can call it neoliberalism, perhaps we can call it this effect of capitalism, if you will, this more colonized mindset? And why was it like that in the UK as opposed to France, when we know France also had colonial projects and some of the Muslim population are descended in France from migrants from France's former colonies? So have you found any data to point towards why this discrepancy emerged, or what went wrong in the way in terms of the UK Muslims?
Yeah, so there's two questions here. For your first question, why are people so entrenched in neoliberalism? I think, you know, there is no simple answer to that because we need to think about neoliberalism as one small piece of a wider global colonial project. In this project, you have things such as other hegemonies, other systems like misogyny, Zionism, white supremacy. It all works together. American imperialism is another one. And this is something you can see all across the world, even if you go to South Asia, to Africa, to South America. You see, for example, what kind of beauty standards people adopt. And this is all coming from the same colonial centers of power, Europe and North America. What are the economic systems people adopt? What is the educational model people adopt? Or healthcare system? So we are living in a world where colonization from the occupation of land has been transformed into the occupation of the mind, the occupation of people's consciousness. It is extremely difficult, even for people, for them to think to outside of these main systems. If you're thinking about, the educational program, you're going to think about what is the UK educational model, for example. And lots of, ex-colonies have adopted the same because, that has become the standard now. And the thing is, because these systems are so omnipresent, for anyone who wants to divest themselves from the system, it's just very hard. If we look at, for example, the goods we buy and consume, whether we're talking about electronics like our phones, computers, the clothing we wear, everything follows the same chains of supply. The extractive practices of companies, whether we're talking about an Apple, Samsung, it's sourcing their components and the minerals in countries which were what we used to call the global south, in just in a horrible way. But how is it possible now, if you live in Europe or North America, to live, let's say, without a smartphone or live without having an account with one of the major banks? It's extremely difficult. So we have been technically trapped in this kind of mental slash cultural slash economic cage, and it's by design. It's very difficult to get out of it. And to put, I would say, a cherry on the top, if you take people who come from these ex colonies to the UK or to North America, who have been deprived for generations from basic rights, they have been deprived from financial stability, they have been deprived from their land, they have been deprived from media visibility, political representation, and you put them in this kind of system, people are in survival mode. And if your main priority, if your priority is to pay your rent, pay your electricity bill, and put food on the table for the kids, uh, people have technically not even the time to sit and think and reflect. What are we doing here? Can we divest from the system? Is there a better way for us to do things? So it's very, very convenient. It's just to know the consequence of these centuries of colonization that have put people. It have has made people an offer they can't refuse. In a way, if we want to paraphrase the Godfather. And to answer your second question, why in France is it so different? Again, there's no simple answer because France has a very, very different culture. And also to put this right ahead, at this, and I don't think it has anything to do with South Asian culture versus North African versus West African culture. Because if you look at South Asians in France, or even South Asian in Spain, South Asians, let's say in Italy, their culture is very, very different from British or American South Asians because ultimately people embrace and absorb the culture of the host country. So, France, to make it very, very simple, and across mainland Europe, you don't have as much as an emphasis on consumerism and material goods as you have in the UK. Because in the UK, this is a problem which is not only for immigrants and their children, it is a problem which encounter the white working class, this pursuit of prestige, trying to appear more middle class or upper class than what you really are. And in France, the society is a bit more, it's still unequal, but it's much less hierarchical than in the UK. You don't have a feudal system, you don't have lords, you don't have knights in France, you don't have royalty. And the education system is much more affordable. If you want to pay for 1 year of a university degree in France, it's £300 compared to 8,000 or 9,000 in the UK. So even people who are, let's say, at the lower levels of the social economic ladder, they are more likely to have an education as opposed to people in the UK. So, a lot of these factors do something, not mentioning in France, the level of Islamophobia is so high that I think, and that's a theory of mine, I don't know if it's true or not, but I think because the level of Islamophobia is so high, people realize that they don't have any other choice than to stick together. And this is why there was such a big emphasis on, no matter what is your madhab, no matter what is your culture, we are all in this together. The ummah is literally, I have your back and you have mine. And I think it's a bit more complicated, but I think that the level of comfort people have in the UK and the US, plus the narrative, the neoliberal narrative that if we work hard enough, if we compete against each other, if we're productive, then we can escape our condition. I think this has done something on people's subconsciousness as well. So yeah, this is a very, very long, I have literally done a whole research project on this, so it's hard to condense it in such a short amount of time. But we'll say it's the simplest version I can give.
No, it's something to chew on, definitely. And I'll ask you again towards the end, but please feel free to tell us where we can find your research, your books, and so on and so forth. Bearing in mind that most of my audience is in Botswana, so we can't just go to the library and see it on the shelf there, but we might be able to access it online. So if you ever want to let us know that you have this piece of research, you can say that it's on such and such a journal, and I'm sure people will be able to find it there. But since you spoke a lot about neocolonialism, I think it's also apt to speak about the responses to neocolonialism, because what we see, if I can speak from my anecdotal experience, since I've not done formal research on this, in response to neocolonialism, you have this hardline conservative culture of the colonized, if we can call them that, and them trying to push this onto the next generation. And the next generation doesn't take this sitting down at all. They rebel against it. And this manifests for many people as leaving Islam or leaving the culture. And then later on in life, they realize, hey, you know what? Islam doesn't say that I have to wear salawat kameez all the time. Islam doesn't say that, yeah, I have to be Hanafi because my dad was Hanafi. If you studied with someone else, then why not follow their madhab? And you go into all those nitty gritties. So, was this response to neocolonialism? Do you think it was something that the neocolonizers had in mind, that this is going to be the response, or is that just an unfortunate after effect of neocolonialism? Over and above that, how do we deal with it in today's age?
Can you provide an example when you say that the response has been ultra conservatism?
Okay, sure, I can do that. So, for example, this is on a broad brush, it's not a single sort of example. So, in response to the neo-colonial strong hand on entertainment, for example, the conservative uncle or auntie from South Asia will say, well, you know what? Don't watch TV. TV is haram. Don't listen to music. All music is haram. Those kinds of things. And then this makes it difficult for the children to live in the host countries, the former colonial countries, if you will. So that's what I was getting at. Things like that.
Okay, so this is something that I have seen maybe at in the late 20 in the late noughties, early 2010s, because I think now I'm talking for Europe and North America, the landscape has changed a lot. But and I cannot speak about former colonies because this was not part of my research. I have read uh, I have read research done on Mauritius because I have a personal affinity with Mauritius, for example, and how, for example, people used to have a kavali and poetry for weddings, and afterwards it has become, it has fell out of fashion because people were saying same things. Music is haram, poetry is haram, and so on. But in Europe, I think the factors were a bit different in the sense that what happened in the early 2000s and early 2010 is, so post 9/11 there was movement of, I would say, Islamic revivalism, where you had lots of young people who started to attend um, Islamic institutes for gaining knowledge in order to be able to have the tools, the intellectual tools to respond to Islamophobes. I'm thinking of Triple IT, I'm thinking about Al-Maghrib Institute, and many others. Not mentioning, you had some which were a bit more Salafi and some other institutes which were a bit more Sufi. But there was this quest for knowledge about, how to respond to these Islamophobes that say that, for example, women have no rights in Islam. And among this movement, there was also a time where the funding and the building of mosques were accelerating. And I remember particularly in France, and this was mainly done thanks to Saudi investments. But when you look at the root of it, the problem with Saudi investments is that they came with some strings attached, meaning that the imams in these mosques must have been trained in Saudi, and they should have, during the khutbah, a certain narrative. But one thing that I found fascinating is that a few years ago, if I remember, it was just before the pandemic or so, the Prince Mohammed bin Salman admitted that this push of the spread of this Saudi-led Islam in Europe and North America was something that was designed in the 1980s during the Cold War on the demand of the United States, who wanted to use Saudi as a as an ally, as a counterforce to Iran. And this is why the US pushed Saudi to spread their own form of political Islam in Europe and in North America, which has been through the funding of and the building of certain mosques, the training of imam, and some other organizations which are, I would say, more community oriented or publishing presses. So you had the first wave of Islamic revivalism, which was really conservative in the sense that music is haram. We should wear these white thobes with a white topi, which have it is a very particular Gulf centric form of Islam. Which I found really interesting. So people in London, for example, instead, South Asians saying bye, they started saying achi instead of bye. And you had like similar phenomenon all across, in France and in the US as well. But I think now in the 2020s, this is a trend that is fading away because people have been more aware of the political implications of this Saudi form of Islam. And people who were, hardcore Salafis back in the 2010s, like in the Dawah scene, they have become a bit more, I would say, liberal, flexible in their opinions. So it's constantly evolving.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I got the bulk of your answer. So that's great. That's a lot to chew on. So then what would I'm asking you to step away from your sociologist profession for just 2 minutes. What is your advice then? How do we survive in this system called neoliberalism? I know as a sociologist you observe, you don't necessarily make recommendations, but here I'm asking you to do that. Could you make a recommendation? How do I, for example, survive in neoliberalism? How do I not fall into these traps that you've outlined?
So there's something that the Palestinian Liberation Movement has taught us all, I think, which is BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction. And this is something actually that this boycott comes from South Africa in the terms of apartheid, and it has now been recycled as a tool for not only the Palestinian cause but oppression worldwide. Because the thing is with capitalism, it is a very simple system. It is a system of supply and demand. So if we are not happy with a certain company, with a certain initiative, the thing is we can vote with our wallets, which means that if we stop collectively buying from certain companies, uh, we cut we cut the demand, and if there's no demand, they'll be forced to diminish the supply or even close down. And we have seen that, since the times of apartheid and even with the Palestinian liberation movement, this is a technique that works. And now we are living in the times of the attention economy, which means that, as we were talking about Instagram and social media at the beginning of our conversation, the same applies here because the all the likes, subscribe, follow, share, all the engagement we have with certain accounts, whether it is negative, positive, this is more power to them, more money to them. Because, now you may have heard the saying, no publicity is bad publicity. And the same goes, every even comment, even if it's negative, we post on a channel, that's more engagement for them. And they're able to make money out of them because of ad revenue, sponsorships, and so on and so on. So in my personal life, one thing I've started to do is trying to see what can I divest from? What can I boycott in a way? So for that, I just look, at the companies, the brands I use, and see if not only I can simply not interact with them, but also if I can find alternatives. And I think this is the second part, which is a bit difficult for some people because it's difficult to find alternatives because most of the time they're very small, sometimes they're hidden, and they don't have the same marketing power as these big companies. But simple things work. For example, if we talk about tissues for the nose when you have a cold, when I was younger, I used to use these disposable tissues. You use them, you throw them away, and that's plastic waste, that's paper waste for the environment. People cut trees for that. But I attended an event where there's a sister who mentioned that they started using handkerchiefs, cotton handkerchiefs that you can rewash. And to me, I didn't cross my mind that, this is what people used to do back in the days. You don't have to rely on disposable tissues if you have a cold. These cotton handkerchiefs, they are just as small and you can use them many times. They're super absorbent. And the same goes, and since them I've adopted and I only use them now. And the same goes with whether it is drinks, food, electronics. It's a bit more difficult, but so many alternatives to Coca-Cola have been born out of the BDS movement. Muslim-owned brands that are actually tasting really good. So there's a proof that there's a possibility we can do things otherwise. Same, when Nike issued their sports hijab, before Nike, you had at least seven Muslim owned companies, women owned companies, family businesses who were producing a sports hijab for cheaper and in better working conditions. Because we know, sadly, Nike is. They are producing lots of their products, or at least they have been, we don't know now, in forced labor camps in China. So, the community, Muslims are very resourceful. There's a lot of talent, there's a lot of money. It's all about just organizing ourselves. So we are able to provide alternatives and we are making sure that people are aware that we don't have to buy Coca-Cola, we don't have to buy Nike, we don't have to go through the same brands, the same system, and so on and so on. It goes for influencers. It goes for our life choices. So it's not only about spending wisely, but also be able to spend less. Lots of people, because they have financial trauma, just like my own parents, they are immigrants. They came to France being very poor. And people overcompensate once people start working. They have their first salaries. It's extremely tempting on spending on designer clothes or spending on a sports car. Now you can buy at credit. You can pay maybe £100 a month for a sports car. So people think that it's possible, and people compensate. I grew up with nothing. Let me have something for myself now. There's a lot of traps that people fall into because of the same narrative of uh, your value is assessed upon what you earn and your material goods. What kind of brands do you wear? What kind of car do you drive? So people do not realize that. Hang on a second. Me spending on a brand new car is a trap. It's a financial. It's putting my financial future in danger, literally, because people do not have the financial literacy to be able to make the right decisions. So a lot comes through informing others, and it comes. It's just very simple. What is our circle of influence? We don't have to post stories on social media or make long YouTube videos about it. It can be just our spouse, our siblings, our family, our friends, and that's enough. God only asks us to do whatever we can in our capacity. We don't have to reach 1 million followers to start talking about the environment or boycotting this or that. We can start within our own household, and I think this is what's beautiful with Islam. We are just asked to plant the seeds because the impact is in God's hands ultimately.
That's beautiful. And I love that last line about planting the seeds to impact. I just want you to build on that. Now, in coming to Muslim spaces, masajid or Muslim, shall we say, cultural clubs like The Cave in London, how do we deliberalize or decapitalize these spaces? I'm not casting an aspersion on The Cave, by the way. Some of those guys are brilliant. I'm just saying in general, we know that a lot of people who run the masajid, for example, are from that generation where you mentioned the Cold War. So if I go and just say socialism, they will be on edge. They will cancel me. They'll tell me not to come to the masjid and so on and so forth. How do we plant the seeds to take those elements of capitalism out of our Muslim spaces?
It is like running a marathon. It is something on the long term. This is not going to happen overnight. But the best thing to start is to unite and do things together. What I mean by that is, again, if we take our families, our friends, as asking ourselves, what can we do in our local community? What can we do in our local masjid? What can we do Um, if we know someone who, let's say, owns a cafe or restaurant, can we turn this into a place for socializing, a place for knowledge, for example? It's all about starting small, because all the initiatives that I have followed who are providing these alternatives, it all started very, very small. It started within, two sisters, a bunch of friends from uni, and they just ask themselves a very simple question. There's homeless people in our neighborhood. What can we do to help them? We have students struggling at university. What can we do with our little Muslim society? And so on. It's not easy, because for some of these people, it took them literally 10, 15 years before they were able to build an audience, but they were consistent. Well, this is something, for example, I can talk about Rabia Mali and the Green Din tribe. This is something, she has this love for planet Earth and the natural environment. She just kept talking about it, organizing events, whether she could. And I remember 10 years ago, there was only five, six, seven people attending her workshops. But now, if you look at the latest iftars organized by the Green Din tribe, there's minimum 300 people coming for iftars that have no meat, no plastic, and no food waste. This is amazing, the progression, because we have lots of people who around the world believe in the same things we believe in, who are looking for the same alternatives. It's just about connecting them, and it's a human thing. It takes time to connect them, and of course it's very tempting to lots of people have been trapped into doing partnerships with bigger organizations or influential people who have very dark sources of funding, because we as humans, we want to see change very quickly, so it's very tempting to, let's say, make a pact with the devil to see this change happen, to get some money very quickly. um, but it has been always counterproductive. I remember some grassroots organizations that ended up being completely screwed over by these big companies that they made a deal, a partnership with, because the bigger ones, it's like the shark in the sea, they eat the small fish, so they wanted to take over the small organization. Alhamdulillah, it didn't happen, but there was a lot of difficult moments like that. So it's all about, and this is something I'm trying to do in my own town. For example, I want to reach out to all the converts that are in my local area, because being a convert to Islam is most often than not a very difficult experience, and I want to be there for people, offer them some support if they need to. If they're alone, for example, during Ramadan, have them over. It's all about starting very small things like this, because you never know. Some people, they start something very small today, and in a few years' time, it can be something very big. We never know.
Beautiful, beautiful, mashallah. And may Allah allow you to go from strength to strength in all the projects that you do. So now let's, as we try to wind this up, let's zero in on yourself, Dr. William. So you have a couple of books that you've written. Could you give us a brief synopsis about both of them? I only know of two. So if there's another one I don't know of, please elucidate on that. And have you done more research, maybe some articles and some journals here and there? Tell us about your tenor of work in, let's say, 5 minutes or less.
Yeah, so the thing is, when I started studying sociology, I wanted to provide practical and useful solutions for people. Because again, problem is academia is a colonial initiative. It's not there for people who need knowledge. It's there to sustain itself, to make more profit. Let's see how universities work in the UK and in the US, and it's very problematic. And traditionally, academia has only been doing research for students, researchers. It's very rarely for people on the ground. We need the solutions. So what I started to do, besides publishing books and articles, is starting a YouTube channel. So it was now almost 10 years ago. And I decided to upload videos about my research findings, but in a very condensed and accessible form. So everyone can understand and watch, a 5, 10 minutes video. and everyone can understand some very complex concepts, and everyone can listen to the wonderful stories I've witnessed in my research journey. So that's I think my biggest intention was to make this content accessible for free, so everyone across the world can access it. We don't have to access a library or to pay for a book. So, and this is something I have done also using this platform for the people who I have met, to be able to have a platform as well. Because again, lots of these initiatives are not Instagrammable. They're not, mainstream media is never going to talk about them. So I wanted to use this platform to also for them to also share their own journey and what they are doing. Besides me talking about them, it was also about creating together experimental pieces, whether we're talking about some fictional pieces, or some short movies, or some other arts projects, for people to be able to reflect on things. Because it's not every form of video speaks to everyone. Some people prefer informative videos where I speak in front of the camera. Some other people prefer a documentary style. Some other people like something which is a bit more comedic. So we were experimenting with a lot of these projects, and the Irad Al-Barani page on Instagram was part of it. Trying to get involved some of my friends into creating something which is a bit provocative for people, just to be able to stop and think, one second, what am I looking at here? So yeah, that's the journey.
Oh, mashallah, that's beautiful, beautiful. So, once again, to hone it in on yourself, what are some things you do to unwind and not think about all the problems we have in the world as a sociologist? You once mentioned in one of your videos that you like playing video games. You mentioned Splinter Cell in particular, and I like that one too because I grew up playing it. And in some of your videos, I see a guitar. Do you actually play, or is that just a prop?
Yeah, I used to play video games when I had the time. Splinter Cell was during my teenage years. Recently, I've come across some other video games, and I'm always interested in games that have an interesting story to tell. Recently, I mean, more recent, not recently, there's a game called Watch Dogs 2. It's almost 10 years old, but it was already talking about all the problems we see with Trump, with the big tech companies taking over the world, with surveillance and how it affects minorities. And this game was 10 years ahead of its time. It's crazy. So I like games which have, make you reflect, make you ask questions. Yeah, and as for the guitar, yes, I don't have the time to play it now, but it is, yeah, it is an instrument I've been playing a lot, but I just didn't have the time to practice.
No, that's great. And Watch Dogs 2 is a great choice, I must say. I've only played Watch Dogs 1, but I'm aware of Watch Dogs. So, yeah, good choice, good choice. And you have great taste, I must say. I'm also a guitarist myself. Inshallah, you'll see in the final video. I'm actually going to create an intro for this, which is just me covering some song or something. But yes, that's that. So, now to wind up, I usually give this platform to the guest. What are some reflections you have on this journey called life? It can be anything and everything. I have no limits.
Yeah, so I think if I wanted to share one of the most important reflections of my life as a Muslim, um, one thing that I have never been taught in any kind of mosques, organizations, institutes, that people don't teach really at madrasas, is, if you're Muslim, what is the purpose of life and the meaning of existence? And that was the one piece of the puzzle that has been missing for so many years in my life as a Muslim, because people go by the very simple answer in the verse that says that Allah has created humans and jinns for them to worship Him. But what do you mean by worship? What does it just mean, like salah, fasting, and stuff, or there's something beyond? But I have a couple of friends that have shared their reflections about if about what does it mean to live on this planet. And one verse that is coming now across more often is this famous verse where God in the Quran says He has created humans to be a khilafah on earth, to be caliphs, to be stewards of the creation, meaning that we are here, and humans, not only Muslims. So whether you are a believer or not, humans have been created to take care of the creation, whether we're talking about the plants, the rocks, or even the animals, or even other human beings. So that was one big thing. And the second thing is, we say that for people who are Sunni, that we follow the Sunnah of the Prophet, we follow him. But what does it mean if we follow the Prophet? Why was he sent to earth in the first place? And again, in the Quran, we are taught that Prophet, peace be upon him, was sent as a mercy to the whole of creation, not only humans, but again, the rocks, the plants, the animals, everything. And so he told me, what is the purpose of our existence if not being a mercy to each other and to everything around us? And that stayed in my mind so much that is it just realized that the purpose of it is just very simple. If you're Muslim and you want to follow the path of God, it's just asking yourself a very simple question every day. This is what I do. At every action I undertake, everything I say, everything before doing anything, I ask myself, am I being a mercy when I do this? Or a mercy when I say that? Or is it the opposite? So it has kept me, always in check to verify that my intentions are the right ones before I do something. And I think this is the most important thing I've learned in this journey.
Beautiful, and we can all learn from those same lessons, inshallah. Dr. William, we've been going on for just over 45 minutes. Do you have any questions for me? Anything of interest that you'd like to know about myself or the podcast, or any sociological question you have about Botswana?
No, I think we can speak about that off camera. I think I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, now that's fine. And yeah, you're more than welcome to have a, second session with myself, inshallah, as the years go on, because I don't just do this for content. I do it to have a connection with people. And inshallah, you're more than welcome to come visit us in Botswana. Otherwise, we'll come visit you in the UK, inshallah, very soon. So please tell us, as the audience and the viewers, where
Inshallah.
can we find, inshallah, I mean, where can we find Dr. William Barylo? On YouTube, on Instagram, and where can we find your books? Where can we find your articles?
So most of my publications are available on my website. So articles, opinion pieces, everything is linked. And the book, sadly, is very, very expensive. And I don't have a control over the pricing of the book. But if you reach out to me by email, again, it's on my website or on my social media, I'll be very happy to facilitate something. But mainly, most of the content is on YouTube. So my channel is just my first name, last name, and all the playlists about the different research projects are on there. So that's the easiest way to access it.
Shukran, we'll put all those links in the description down below. So, audience, please do yourselves a favor and go and check out Dr. William's work. If you're not into reading, then check out his YouTube page and download those videos on the app. And if you're not going to watch them, at least play them in the background while you're doing dishes and driving on the car, because it is an attention economy at the end of the day. But Dr. William Barylo, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to come and do this. Dr. Barylo, by the way, for the viewers, I can cut this out if you don't want it publicized. He just had a baby. So congratulations to you. May Allah make it easy. Ramadan is coming up. May Allah bless your family, bless your household, and bless everyone and anyone who is connected to you. That's to Dr. Barylo, but also above and beyond to everyone who's listening and watching and who's made it this far in the podcast. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Dr. Barylo, it's been a blast. Thank you. Would like to have you on many more times, inshallah. And for the rest of you, we'll be back. And I won't take another Ramadan, another whole year to get another episode up, inshallah. All right? So until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.